My name's AJ. My topic was California's minimum wage. My proposition is that minimum wage is gonna cause economic problems. And if you don't know, minimum wage is on the rise to $13 an hour. And some of the problem, it's gonna cause economic problems. For instance, increasing the minimum wage would force businesses to lay off employees and raise unemployment levels. 38% of employers who currently pay minimum wage said they would lay off some employees if the minimum wage were to rise. And 54% employers said they would decrease hiring levels. Minimum wage would also hurt small businesses. Jamie Richardson, the vice president of the fast food chain White Castle, said that the company would be forced to close almost half of its stores and to let go thousands of workers, and that the federal minimum wage were raised to $15. Small businesses with paying employees $15 an hour would be hurting themselves also, because they would have to pay the employees more money, and it'd be coming out of their profits. So to get that money back, businesses would be starting to do something called inflation. Inflation is in order for a business that has to pay for employees higher minimum wage, the business will start to increase prices in the goods they offer. So just the prices of like normal items, like a McDonald's would go up. Like actually McDonald's, I did notice like in 2017, when the minimum wage went to $10, they got rid of the dollar menu. It just changed it to like a value menu. It was like $2. Not much, but no. It also had an effect on young adults and teenagers. Matthew Rasu, a PhD associate professor of economics at Susquehanna University, wrote an article that the federal minimum wage has a devastating impact on teenagers because firms will not pay young workers with no skills or experience minimum wage, let alone the higher rate wage. According to a PEW Research Center, 16 to 24-year-olds make up 50.4% of minimum wage earners. So teenagers that turn eligible working age, they would have a tougher time getting into a job with no skill set. And also, when businesses can't afford to pay a low-skilled employee, they'll just start to replace them with machines, robots, etc. Also, for example, again, McDonald's has those touchscreen menus you could just order off of. So, minimum wage economics will cause economic problems and mainly start inflation. Just that one.
Okay. Okay, AJ, I think you've got some of the right things to say in your presentation, but a couple of places they are not as clearly expressed as they should be, and the organizational structure is also a bit of a problem. You did a pretty good job citing most of your evidence, but there are some things that I think need citations for. So let's go to the beginning. The first problem that I see is in the proposition. You say the minimum wage will cause economic problems. I believe that your argument really is an increase in the minimum wage will cause the economic problems. So you want to specify that you're not saying the mere existence of a minimum wage is going to cause all these harms. It is the proposed increases or the scheduled increases, especially in California, or proposed increases nationwide would cause these problems. So this is like a claim of future fact. This is what's going to happen if minimum wages go up. So you want the proposition to be expressed that way. There's no layout of what the content or structure is going to be. You need to preview for us what the supporting points are going to be, and you don't do that. There's controversy on this issue to some degree. I think most people recognize that there are people who think the minimum wage should go up, and there are people who think the minimum wage doesn't need to go up, or if it goes up, it'd be problematic. I think you could probably give us a little bit more context and background on this argument and why this is something that you ought to be talking about. But I do think that most people have a basic understanding that there is an issue that's going on here. In the body of the speech, there's not really a clear structure. Like I said before, you didn't lay out a structure in the preview. Here's what I think the supporting points are. I think you've got an argument that says that increasing the minimum wage would result in layoffs, increasing the minimum wage would have a negative effect on small businesses, and increases in the minimum wage will hurt young adults and teenagers. I believe those are the secondary points. I shouldn't be guessing at that, though. It should be very clear with declarative sentences and numerical signposts. So when you get to that point, let's say the first thing that's going to happen by increasing the minimum wage is it's going to result in layoffs, and then present your argument. Now that we know that a whole bunch of people are going to get laid off, here's a second problem that comes with increasing the minimum wage. Small businesses, many of them, will close. They'll be hurt, and present your evidence about White Castle and all the information that's going on there. And finally, increasing the minimum wage, the third point that I'm making is that it's going to create a barrier to young workers, and particularly teenagers, in being able to get into the job market. So you make all of those arguments. They're all there. But it's like you're hiding them from us. You know, you just kind of say them in passing instead of making clear declarative sentences and signposting them. Speeches are different. That I've said this to people a number of times. It's different. If you're reading something, I can kind of figure out the structure as I'm looking at it, especially if you've got it in a different paragraph. We don't see paragraphs when you're speaking. We don't know what's a new paragraph or when there's a comma as opposed to a period, or you're skipping a space, or there's an indentation. So you have to tell us those things as a speaker. The evidence that you had, like I said, I thought that you had some good information on potential impacts here. The sources are not as clear as they need to be. So you had this 38% of small business owners said that they're going to lay off some people, 54% that said that they will decrease hiring. And I don't know where that information comes from. I don't know where you found it. I don't know where the source that you are quoting found it. I don't know if it's the same or if it's original research. This is a problem. You need to cite the sources. There is one quote from the executive at White Castle that is clearly attributed to that person. So that part, I do think you do indicate what the source is on that. You've got the example of the McDonald's menu, and it went away. Sounds like it's a personal example and observation, although I think most people would remember those sorts of things. I'm not sure anybody would have associated with the minimum wage. It would be great if there was some other way to connect those two. I'm not saying don't use it, but as proof, it's, I think, a little bit of a stretch, but I think it points to what you're talking about. As prices go up, it's harder and harder for businesses to offer the kinds of incentives to consumers that they would like to have. The inflation argument needs to be developed a lot more. It's the one that's the least developed of all of your particular points. The first point, there's some pretty good information. The inflation argument, you've got the dollar menu. I think there's more to it than that. And then the last point, I think, is also reasonably well developed for the amount of time that you have. Now, the truth is, it's a short speech. You have a lot more time that you could fill in information for and make a stronger argument for your cases here. You explain the basics about what's likely to happen, but I don't get much demonstration. For example, replacing people with robotics or technology, how expensive is that? How quickly can they recoup their costs? Is that something that consumers are resistant to, or is that something that consumers embrace? Is that going to change the economy? Those are all arguments or issues that need to be answered as part of your argument, and the answers are not going to be in your speech the way it is now. So, there's pretty good content. there is an organizational structure, but it's not very clear for the presentation, and you need to fix that. Okay, thank you.